What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of HR Heretics. Today we have Troy Sultan, who is the CEO and founder of Guide on the show. Troy, what's up, man?
What's up? Let's get into some heresy.
Okay. So I think what would be most helpful for the audience is anchoring them in our relationship. So I think our relationship goes back to like 2011, 2012. I was a recruiting coordinator at Google. And Troy ended up being a candidate that I was chaperoning around one day. We built a little bit of a friendship there. He got hired at Google. And then if you can think of like me, 14, 15 years ago, kind of being like a little bit of a rebel, Troy was also like a little bit of a rebel. So then he goes off and does his thing. I go off, I go to DoorDash. And then Troy builds, I would describe it as like a sourcing as a service company. But Troy, do you want to like talk about that story really fast?
Yeah, would leave Google, would quit at the 9-month mark. Well, everybody around me thought I was totally insane because we had made it. This is like 2013 at Google. We had made it. Well, everyone's made it. Why? What do you mean leave? What do you mean leave? We have free food everywhere. I would leave, and you were at DoorDash, and we were building an elastic sourcing team that you can plug in, plug out of as you're scaling your company as a supplement or substitute for an in-house sourcing team. And I remember showing up to the DoorDash office, if I recall. I pinged you. There were 40, 50 people at DoorDash at the time. You were running talent, I believe. And you were like, hey, this sounds super interesting. We had a bit of a relationship from the Google days. And I remember, I don't know if this was like this deep into the decision process, but I just remember mostly selfishly, I like picked up like 5 or 6 like half-pound hot chocolate chip cookies from the Westfield Mall in Selma, and I showed up to the office with them and like offered them to you guys. And at least when we left and we signed that deal with you, I really tried to tell myself the cookies didn't matter. You really liked the product and the service, but it's still unclear.
I don't like cookies anyway, so like definitely not the cookies. Yeah. Okay. So the thing with with your first company, Resource, right, is essentially it was Gem. And at DoorDash, we were like very early users. I remember the conversation we had was like, oh, like we have these sourcers that can like add capacity on the back end. And I was like, dude, I actually just want to supercharge my sourcers with tech. Like, can I have the tech that you're giving them? And that's when you started to build the software play. Ultimately, though, you couldn't scale as fast. Like, what's the story there? Why did Gem win?
Yeah, great question. So for context, we ended up selling this business to Gem in 2021 to work on our now company Guide, which we'll get to. The story is very evolutionary. But we learned a lot of lessons in product building for HR and recruiting teams versus like go-to-market and marketing to HR and recruiting teams. And at the time, as you mentioned, we always wanted to build software. We started with a kind of service layer to really understand the problem. You and others around us really encouraged us to ship the software we had built internally for our own sourcing team that we were using as the service layer. And as companies like you began to adopt it, I think, one, we were very green entrepreneurs, Austin and I, and didn't value, we kind of had that classic early mindset that if you build it, they will come. So we were hyper product focused and really, I think, underpriced the importance of go-to-market marketing and great sales. And as we grew that business, which, for context, was initially an outbound sourcing automation and emailing platform for sourcing teams, to ultimately grow into something like a CRM. We would compete with Gem as our primary competitor for years. And I think we had a lot of insecurity, frankly. I remember we were at like 300,000 or 400,000 in annual recurring revenue before we actually made a website. That's a true story. So we just had like a blank page that said something ominous on it. And we had like dozens of customers at the time. And if you get under that, probably I can tell you some deeply childhood stories that happened to me when I was younger that ultimately led me to be like a really poor entrepreneur in this context. But I think the short of it was we were built on top of LinkedIn at the time, and we were a cold email platform at the time for sourcing. And both of those felt like a little dirty to us. And I think it really would come back into the fore later when we had the opportunity to spin out our new company Guide, which we would say now in sort of, I think, diplomatic speak. It was more aligned with our values. We we always felt a little dirty doing email, and we always felt a little dirty built on top of LinkedIn. And I think that led to a lot of symptoms that weakened our go-to-market approach.
Yep. So Gem ends up winning and then buying. What did they buy? Did they buy the product? Did they buy your customers? Like, what did they buy?
Yeah, to give Gem credit, and this was an incredible lesson for me, as we're growing the resource business, which was growing, but not going crazy. Gem came into the market, I think something like a year and a half later. We didn't really take them too seriously. We were kind of way ahead in product. And they grew, they launched out of YC, and they just took off from day one, screaming about what they did from the rooftops, being proud of it, seemingly not having much insecurity. On top of that, they had an excellent go-to-market and sales team. And I know because I was selling against them, getting my ass kicked. And that was a school of hard knocks that I'm still almost every day grateful for, because it really taught me the importance of the sales process. And I was frustrated at the time, but I knew that it was like going to come back around and be valuable. But we've ultimately built a tool internally that was not intended to ultimately become another company, but we got more excited about that tool, which was solving an adjacent problem: candidate experience automation, interview scheduling automation. And we built that out of our own need. We had a couple dozen people at the time and no recruiters. And so all of our product and engineering team had to do our own recruiting, and it was a slog. And so we started building internal hacks to alleviate some of the pain. Ultimately saw like the light. We saw a more 5-10 year company that was more exciting to me and Austin, my co-founder, in terms of like our values. So this would finally get us in front of the candidate. We'd finally be able to like directly impact the candidate experience instead of doing so by proxy of making the recruiter more efficient, et cetera. And we quite got lucky. We said, well, what do we do with this business? We've got, 100 customers all over the world. It's a good business, not a great one. We can't do both. And we ultimately ended up, I was quite fearful to reach out to Gem. I thought they were the most well-fitting acquisition target. They were number one acquisition target on our list. And we thought, maybe we can sell this thing. We didn't want to screw our customers over because we knew we were going to spin out Guide to sell directly into that team on an adjacent problem in these customers. So our reputation was paramount. And we just felt like we never were in this to like cash out and walk away from the base. Always cared about the impact. And so our customers were important. And the risk was reaching out to Gem, letting them know that we wanted to sell, and having them take that, immediately feed it to their sales team and have their sales team planning FUD with all of our customers they were excellent at, and telling our customers, oh, FYI, did you know that like Resource is trying to sell? And so we were kind of terrified. I was kind of terrified to reach out to the CEO. So I had a middle person, a broker, essentially do it. And Steve, the CEO of Gem, ignored, if I recall correctly, the email from the broker. I think he probably deduced it was us, but I at least had plausible deniability, which is what we needed. And then wrote me a fantastic email with me and Austin copied, out of just proactively, just wrote us an email. And he praised us for what we built. And it was such a lesson learned. I think his email subject line was like, we're huge fans of Resource. And he had his co-founder copied. I mean, we were kind of enemies in a sense. Maybe they didn't view it that way, but they were the big competitor that was kicking our ass in sales. So we didn't really like them. And had he not wrote such a mature, and I think A+ email with no ego in it, we would have never got this deal done. So I give Steve a ton of credit. And I still reference that email, once a year, every 6 months when I think about it, because there was so much wisdom in it. He just praised our product building chops. He knew what we were good at. He said, it would be quite interesting to marry that with our go-to-market chops. And your customers, like, nobody's able to steal Gem customers away. You guys are the only ones to do it. And all the other people in the space, we found it much easier to rip their customers away. Your customers kind of love you. Like, this is quite something you've built. Let's chat.
Troy, I would bet my left ankle there's someone on the call here that owns a company or runs a company that wants to try and sell it. What did you tell the broker to write? How did that email look? And did you have a hand in kind of crafting it, or what do you think?
Yeah, I did get my eyes on it before it went out, and it was somewhat generic, but the broker had a lot of information on us prior. So he spent a lot of time interviewing us and understanding our business and building a hit list with us of potential acquirers. We obviously had a strong hand in that ranking, building that list. He knew Gem was probably our top target. The reason was not because we thought we'd get the most money from Gem, but we actually thought it would be the best strategic fit or landing spot for our customers. We thought it would give us the credibility we needed to go launch our new company. And we thought that if possible, we can negotiate a partnership with the new company in tandem with Gem, which happened to have a lot of compatibility, we thought. I also felt like I could somewhat understand the CEO of Gem's mindset because we were running a very similar business. And I thought this actually would make the most sense for Gem too, if I have a good theory of mind. So the email was fairly generic. There is a competitor in the space looking to get acquired. The founders are more excited to move on to another project. And here's like an NDA and basically a data room with some like high level info. And if I recall now, as I'm telling the story, I believe Steve signed the NDA immediately, looked at the data room, might have realized at that point it was us. And then he just didn't even, I don't think he responded, if I recall, to the broker. He just emailed me and Austin directly.
Would you have done the same thing again, going back, or would you have just emailed Steve yourself?
Could have saved a lot of money on the broker. Yeah. I would have done the same thing again. I wouldn't have done it. It just seemed either too risky, but maybe not. In fact, that was my sense at the time. It just felt like I didn't want to put our business at risk. One
thing I just want to ask while we're here is the go-to-market piece you learned a lot of lessons on. And I've seen over my years, and like most recently being in the go-to-market team at Pendo, selling and working with HR leaders on the Pendo product, it's a different animal to sell into, to connect with. Like, I just would love to double down on some of the lessons you learned, and maybe you're applying that to guide now. What is different about the go-to-market with these HR folks?
As an HR-focused software business who hires in leaders that are really good at their domain, a VP sales, VP marketing, I've learned now, after working with enough of these people, the feedback is always the same. Wow. Like, my confidence levels are really high because like I know the shit cold. And now that I'm here, these people are a bit different. Like, what do you mean? They don't have budget. They don't have there's subtleties about the HR org. And I think I always underpriced how different they were to other buyers because I've never sold to other buyers and I've never worked on any other teams. I come out of a recruiting team myself and a recruiting background myself. So I've never really understood it, but from the point of view of the recruiting and TA folks. And we typically aren't the most influential seat at the table. We're a service organization. The VP of Eng is going to get budget and say before us, the VP sales, the VP marketing, mostly everyone before talent. Talent is here to serve these other VPs in a sense. This has become a cultural shape of how some companies have grown culturally. And that's a really hard to see thing from the outside.
You have to experience it.
Yeah. It was a gift and a curse that I was sitting in that seat as a buyer at one point, and I still had to get punched in the face with the reality many times. But I do think that really documenting this stuff and doing it yourself as a founder over and over until you see some repeatability, probably far past the point of your own pain threshold. This is really painful. This isn't where I should be or want to be spending my time all day in sales, say, but this is the most valuable place where I can really dial in what works before I hire in somebody, because they're going to have a playbook that works, or they're going to end up having to learn and build the intuition that took years and years to build. The ramp's going to be slow. They're going to kind of have to learn all these lessons again. So either that's one route, or the other is to just bring somebody out of the TA space that gets it, that learned on someone else's dime, essentially.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Your workforce is your organization's greatest strength and often its largest single expense. But without the right tools, understanding where your workforce spend is going or how it impacts your bottom line can be a challenge. That's where Planful comes in. With Planful, HR and finance teams get the clarity they need to make smarter workforce decisions, gain real-time visibility into workforce fluctuations, forecast with confidence, and adjust talent acquisition plans collaboratively based on costs today and into the future. No more guesswork, just data-driven insights to help you plan with accuracy. And the best part, Planful is fast and easy to implement, so you can be up and running in weeks, not months, with minimal IT support. Plus, as your company grows, Planful grows with you, providing endless runway for strategic workforce planning at any scale. Ready to take your workforce planning to the next level? Join over 1,500 organizations already using Planful. Visit planful.com/heretics to learn more.
I must admit, I used to believe that AI didn't actually exist in recruiting or HR. That is until my friend Heather Doche, who leads talent at Signalfire, told me to check out Metaview. I got into the product and was like, wow, AI actually does exist in recruiting, and this product is sick. Metaview is the world's #1 AI scribe built specifically for recruiting. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. I've seen firsthand how tough it can be to extract consistently high-quality data from candidate conversations. I've been in debriefs where interviewers told us about their feelings instead of what actually happened in the interview. And I've seen VPs and CEOs block hires because they didn't learn anything from skeleton scorecards. Metaview changes everything. With perfect notes from every conversation, your people can focus on creating a human connection with candidates, and they can save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Metaview covers all your compliance needs, works with all your existing tools, and takes less than 3 minutes to set up. Join talent leaders at organizations like Brex, Deal, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts. Tell them that me and Kelli sent you. Or you could just go to their website and get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes. So Troy, going back to the sale, so you sell the company, and then you decide then to go build another company in the candidate experience space. And like, I think the criticism right now I hear from founders, there's this, I'll call it a soundbite that like, oh, like I don't give a shit about candidate experience anymore because look, I post a job and I have 2,000 people that apply to my job in 24 hours. Like everyone wants to work here. Why do fucking people care about this? Like, why did you build a company in the space so much that you care about it so much?
Yeah, I've always felt, just from a personal standpoint and personal motivation, a motive standpoint, I've always felt like the power balance between companies and candidates was unfairly lopsided. I think it's in the company's best interest for the candidate to have more power in the interview process long term. And I think companies tend to hire with a very short-sighted view. And this is true when you just look at the metrics that drive the incentive system. So a recruiter, for example, generally speaking, gets a win when they make a hire. They're metriced on offer accepts commonly. Now, whether that candidate actually is at the company 3 months later is irrelevant to the scoreboard of the recruiter. And there's something missing about that feedback loop. And the company is losing out when they actually make a hire, give a W over to this team that shepherded that process, and they actually just lost 50 grand and a ton of the company's time, and they're back at square one. And so I do think that the candidate experience is intertwined with employee performance in a way that might be unobvious. And I think transparency is one of the key principles that comes to mind. Do you want to persuade somebody to join you? Or do you want to like lay out the kitchen sink and have them persuade themselves to join you? And I think these are very different things. And I think our instincts as TA teams, as founders, is to run a quote unquote sales process, which I think can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. I think it's to persuade someone, to show them, as I like to say, to avoid the blemishes. I want to sell the shiniest version of our company. And this lack of transparency or authenticity, if you will, actually bites the company in the ass too. You just got to look another year down the road, right? And we typically don't set our aperture that wide when we talk about or think about these things. So yeah, one argument is I'm really passionate about it for reasons that might be good or bad. And I've taken a lot of Tylenol as a result. And the other is, okay, does this actually matter to the company? Like, whatever I think, philosophical musings aside, do companies give a shit? And how do you tell what they give a shit about? Well, they're paying for the things that they give a shit about. And they're prioritizing the things that they give a shit about. And very commonly in TA teams and culture, in my experience, you get we really care about candidate experience. I mean, maybe, but for like private one-on-one conversations, you get this general trope. Yeah, candidate experience is super important. But then you look at the way they're prioritizing their time, and it would suggest that all they care about is getting butts in seats. Like candidate experience kind of falls down the list. And then you challenge it, and the truth comes out. It's like, we don't have time for that, or we can't afford to do that. So I do think there's a real argument that, and a real belief that candidate experience is second priority to just getting people in the door. I think there are a handful of reasons for that. I will lastly say that this has shifted, I believe, the level of prioritization in the market during like the zero interest rate phenomenon chapter of tech and post. We've seen some shifts, and I have some opinions about that as well. But that's maybe we can get to that later.
There's a lot there around. Kelli and I talk about this all the time, and along with our friend Colleen McCreary, it's like defining who you are is like the most important thing, and then just being true to that as opposed to being aspirational, which is what most companies want to do. And it ends up serving as like a magnet or repellent, which is what you want. And I love your framing of just like kind of like showing the warts and showing what it actually is and letting that person like really lean in and opt in. I guess the next thing I want to get to is like, so you just launched a new product, which I think is like causing a little bit of a stir in the space, which is this like AI RC. And so there's two threads to AI right now and what's being built. In one thread, people are building like the robot that's like coming for people's jobs. And then in the other thread, they're building kind of like the Tony Stark Iron Man, trying to like give people more power. So can you just like explain to the audience, what is this product you're building and which thread are you guys taking?
Guide today is what I would describe as an AI powered recruiting coordination platform. We use the latest technology that's available to automate a lot of the administrative side of the coordination process, like interview scheduling, and a lot of the candidate experience tasks for candidates, i.e., interview prep and schedule delivery and transparent information about what to expect throughout the process. So a lot of stuff that would typically fall into this zero-sum contest between efficiency in the eyes of the recruiting team and quality of candidate experience. And historically, for as long as I've been in TA, this has been a zero-sum trade. If we want a better candidate experience, we have to be willing to tip the seesaw away from efficiency. If we want to be really efficient, we have to take a hit on candidate experience. I think we're at the first time in history of TA where now the technology is enabling us to do both. We don't need to make this trade anymore. We can be more efficient. We can automate hours and hours of manual human work, and we can do that while driving up candidate NPS. I think today it is not a black and white choice between Iron Man suit for RC or a robot that replaces them. I believe we are likely on a place to a few critical and historically relevant functions in TA of being completely automated out of the picture. I believe those two roles are the recruiting coordinator and the sourcer. However, I think we will need to build the Iron Man suit to make these people more capable and productive for potentially months or years before AI and software is capable of doing their job as good or better than them. So I think this is a case of both. And my personal view is somewhat agnostic about the timeline. I think there's a wide range of timeline this can happen on. But if you just play a radical thought experiment, will there be a recruiting coordinator in 100 years from now? I think the answer is no. So now we can debate, how many years is it going to take?
And just like very simply said, Troy, this is like for folks out there, that are still nervous about AI and really haven't taken the leap yet. And I'm just channeling them and saying, hey, if I really took a bet and went all in with this AI stuff, like what would go really well and is really seamless, and what might slap me in the face and isn't perfect and is kind of clunky?
Yeah, I think this is a good question about expectations. And things are changing so quick, it's hard to know what to expect as a user of this technology. I think the most helpful frame of mind especially for folks in TA who want to level up, or managers in TA, leaders in TA who want their team to level up and be prepared for the future. I think it's to take a very experimental and open-minded approach to trying tools and technologies that may actually challenge the way you're currently working. They will probably get the experimental frame is helpful or critical because of the inherent appetite and tolerance for failure when you have an experimental mindset. You need to be okay with things failing, with people flailing, with errors happening. And so today, the way that I would think about approaching the newest in AI and automation in particular in TA is by rethinking your ICs from being authors to being editors. And when you think about what it means to be an editor, it means that they still have control of the wheel at the last mile. They still can curate what comes out of the company to the outside world. But it doesn't mean that they're necessarily doing the draft. They're not writing the draft. And that's already quite a leap. And I think when we start there, we still have control. We've alleviated the risk and thus our anxiety. And we can better calibrate how much am I needed in this process? And frankly, today, I think you're quite needed as a sourcer and a recruiting coordinator in this process. The question is, how does that evolve over time?
The author and editor thing is perfect. Like that's the biggest barrier that I've seen and heard. And frankly, felt myself, year or 2 years ago, like whether to try this stuff out is, I can't go back or everything's going to break. And it's like, no, just pick a little piece of it and have full editing mode as you go through it.
Totally. And that's the best use of it today. Like that's how, there's nothing that I'm pushing with AI that goes like straight to production.
ChatGPT is not writing an email that then gets sent, right? You still get to edit it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great framework, Troy. So, okay. So you guys launched, you call it Aria, which is
AI powered recruiting coordinator.
Okay. How does it work? Like, what does Aria do today, and how much of it is it primarily still like the RC is like the editor at the end of the day?
Yeah, great segue. So Aria lives in your ATS, almost like a floating assistant that follows you around. And when you make certain movements of candidates through your ATS, Aria will make suggestions of what she wants to go do based on what she's inferred from the candidate moving, say, from the phone screen to the on-site stage in your ATS. Aria will take all the data that she knows about your ATS and your prior behavior, like what templates you typically send out at that stage and such, and she will suggest the step that she wants to take. You can review, edit, or approve that step. For each stage in an interview process and each role, Aria can be set on one of two modes, what we call co-pilot and what we call autopilot. Autopilot is once I've reviewed a same step, let's say every candidate I move in the software engineering role into the recruiter phone screen. As a recruiter, I always want to send the same email with a self-schedule request every time. There's no variance. Okay, so once I've approved that a few times, Aria will ask, or I can tell Aria, I don't need to approve this anymore. Let's turn this step on autopilot. So Aria will then let you know in real time that she's about to run an automation. Here's the task that she's about to automate. And now I have a few seconds, 5 seconds to intervene. And I see a notification pop up. I see what Aria is about to go do automatically. And I think this intervention step is critical. So much of the user experience it can create or reduce anxiety. And so visibility, when you're dealing with automation and TA teams, there's stakes. You can do a thing that loses you face and it hurts your company's brand. And this creates immense amount of justified anxiety. So even when you're automating things, I think it's critical that the tools you're using are really transparent about what they're going to automate, exactly what's going to happen and to who. And I have a chance as a user to intervene if that's not what I want to happen exactly as is before it happens.
So you have hundreds of customers and you have been able to watch what companies do for their candidate experience. I want to know, taking kind of like the best of all of these different companies, like if you walked me through the attraction phase all the way to offer accepted, Like, what does the best world-class candidate experience look like?
Yeah, there's a really interesting trend that we've been seeing that I've particularly found really exciting, that undermines, or rather underscores, like what I think is quickly becoming like the world-class candidate experience. So I've already mentioned transparency. That one seems fairly intuitive. The more transparent, typically the higher the NPS. I think speed is one of the most underrated principles in like a radically good candidate experience. We tend to think about the content we're sharing or how high touch we are. We don't think about how quickly we can get the candidate an answer. So we can have a whole nother debate about how effective or helpful or productive that is for a company to move fast. But from a candidate's point of view, there is little benefit. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, little benefit from the candidate's point of view to waiting longer to know where the company stands. So speed is a major underpriced asset for TA teams that I think goes overlooked. And the last thing that I think is one of the most exciting trends that I've seen that is a little counterintuitive is that increasingly the highest NPS candidate experiences that we see at Guide are becoming more and more self-service. And this is very counterintuitive because as a recruiter myself, and as somebody who's been on many recruiting processes with a strong motive to deliver a good experience, it feels like the more I'm encourage the candidate to do themselves, my intuition is that the worse they'll feel their experience went. Here, you schedule this meeting yourself. Here's all the prep information you need. We're not going to get on a call. You can review it whenever you feel like it. Your interview's on Tuesday. You review it in the middle of the night if you want. You don't need to show up at 3:00 with this calendar agreement that we have here for 30 minutes. If you want to, I'm available. But you have the ability, if for teams that are transparent and robust in the information that they share up front, I'd say specifically with the use today of a candidate portal. This is like a modern, I would say, addition to the TA stack that is exceptionally highly rated by TA teams once they put it into use. Looks like a nice to have. Once you use it and you hear your candidates telling you about it, you will not be able to rip it out. Hard to justify up front, impossible to justify ditching once you've done it. You don't need to buy software for this, by the way. You can do clever things for free with Notion docs and Google Docs. It'll be a little more manual, but it's totally possible to do without software. And when you do this, you realize that many candidates don't want to do an on-site prep call with you. They want the information and they want to go review that information the night before their interview at 11:30 p.m. after they put their kids to bed. Okay. You're an annoyance to them at 3:00 on a Thursday. Okay. And when you give them just that option, you're pissing people off subtly or not. And this impacts your NPS. So giving folks options is critical. And that includes self-serving into all of the information you might otherwise give them in an interview process.
I've never heard somebody describe it that way, but it makes total sense. And I'm assuming what you mean is like a kind of like a choose your own adventure. So it's like, yeah, I can talk to you at Thursday at 3 p.m. if you'd like, right? Or all the same information can be found here. Choose your own adventure and you go do this, which then ultimately scales the recruiter.
Here's my calendar if you need it.
I just had a visual of me like negotiating an offer with an AI agent and just being like, listen, I want more equity. I want Troy, what industries are you seeing latch onto this? And what are, Nolan said you have hundreds of customers. That's awesome. Who's into this and who's not?
Yeah. Somebody asked me the other day, I think, do you only service tech companies? And I said, what's an example of a company that's not a tech company? Exactly. I don't know what that means anymore, actually.
I feel like we've been saying that for years. Every company's a tech, like, stop saying that.
I think what they meant, and what often is the question for Guide, is, are we more relevant to tech-focused jobs, serving tech-focused jobs than others? And I would say no. I would say Guide's bread and butter, and with any real modern candidate experience software, I would argue the bread and butter is in high skill labor, white collar work, where Guide and other sort of white glove style products aren't as helpful is in high turnover, more blue collar roles. So that said, we have an amalgamation of customers from the One Medicals of the world using us both on software engineering, hiring across the board, to clinicians in their retail offices, to Glossier hiring salespeople and marketers in their New York office to also hiring associates for the retail stores. But our customer base at Guide tends to be the most progressive, modern, post IPO tech company, or I'd say growth company that wants to deliver and believes in the best candidate experience in the world. They want to win on experience, and they want to do so with like a lean, mean, high functioning talent machine.
I can't get away from thinking of the hospitality, the retail, right? The highly seasonal, really big workforce hiring. I mean, that self-service thing, it could be incredible for those industries.
But even for engineering, right? Like I just think about like running engineering, recruiting a DoorDash, and like everyone's going through the same process. Now, like, I don't think you're ever going to automate the relationship building, which is a key piece for me when I make a job change, right? It's like, obviously, like, what is the company? What is the role? And then it very quickly gets into who am I working with, and do I want to be in the trenches with these people, right? But like, what is the company? What is the role? We did the same thing every time. We're just repeating ourselves.
Everything else gets in the way. Get me to the stuff. Get me to the people. Get me to the stuff that software can't do. Software ought to be doing the rest.
But the relationships might not be as important if I'm, working part-time during the holiday season. Like, I don't care about that. Like that's interesting for that scale, as well as the relationships.
That's a good point. And last fall, I got really deep into kind of like the one-way dynamic AI-based interview, and who's gonna, like, is that thing coming? And it's like, the answer is it's for sure coming, but where it's starting is with that hourly worker that you're talking about, Kelli.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm trying to, I don't know, go somewhere for 4 months, I don't really care who I work with. Great. I'm going to go on here. I'm going to self-service here. But I do care if I'm, an engineer kind of living with a place for 5 years.
This goes back to the point, or the question around candidate experience. I actually find this intuition to be questionable as well. And I have it myself, which is, all of the automation, like interviewing automation. Hey, our agent's going to be doing the interviewing at the top of the funnel at some point, right? Where might that start? Our instincts say probably really high volume, like McDonald's is using this to be way more efficient. What's interesting to me is when you break that down, you learn. And you don't really need to dig too far. You can go on some really funny and insightful subreddits where people are telling their stories about the recruiting process. And you learn that, guess what? The people interviewing for those really high turnover kind of blue collar roles, they are just as human as the person over here interviewing for the high skill labor role. And they actually happen also to not feel great about getting interviewed by a robot today, unless there is a direct value proposition to them. So yes, is it better for McDonald's? Absolutely in the short term. But do their candidates like this? No, generally. Unless you can frame to them very clearly the benefit. And there may or may not be benefits today with all of the tools that are involved. We're early in the cycle of evolution here. But for example, if as a candidate, I can find out whether I get this job in twice as fast, in half the time that I otherwise would, if I'm willing to go through this process versus one that's dependent on humans on the other side, I might happily make that trade.
Interesting.
So I think it's really critical, if you're going to put automated tools in front of candidates, to be very clear about how it benefits them. And if it doesn't benefit them, that's okay. You just need to know you're making that trade. That needs to be a trade you're willing to make.
To Nolan's point, I mean, we disagree a lot, but the choose your own adventure thing is also interesting, where you can actually choose which one you prefer.
I'm so shocked that you're seeing data that's like, we actually prefer the self-serve experience. And just to back up, Kelli, you're seeing that with white collar jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I'm actually shocked. I mean, I worked at Starbucks back in the day, and I might again, depending on how this damn economy goes. But if I'm like, listen, I'm going to go, be a part-time barista for 3 months during the holiday season, I would 100% opt into self-service. Like, I don't really care who's interviewing me. Everyone shifts around, and I would actually prefer that. So, but it's really cool to see that the preference is Troy, which is where I think this.
Troy, are you seeing it for white collar too? Like, primarily?
Yeah. I mean, it's a general trend across our customer base. I think it's actually a cultural, my hypothesis is this is actually a cultural phenomenon. I think we're used to seeing a a tracker about how close my dasher is with my food in real time. Like, I don't need to call anybody. I don't need to check in. I just open an app and I see what's up. I'm interviewing. I want to know where I'm at. I don't want to have to email somebody. I want to know what to prepare next. I want a calendar link. If I need a real-time call, I want a customer service number that I can call, right, with DoorDash if I have an issue. But I don't want to be assumed that I want to talk to that customer service rep on the phone. I think we live in a self-serve world, and recruiting has not yet evolved.
Yeah, I think with white collar too, I would say it's up to a certain point. Like, I think before you get married and sign on the bottom line and accept the offer, I mean, you have to make sure that you enjoy the place, the relationships. I'm hearing a lot of this upfront stuff, which I would totally opt into, like prep calls and all these things you can do without a person. Am I going to go work for Troy just by doing that? Probably not.
Self-serve, to be clear, I agree with that, Kelli, 100%. Self-serve, I think, is just merely another way of saying, give me the option to experience this interview process the way that I want, not the way that you want. And that means if what I prefer is talking to Troy before I take the job, his calendar link is always available to me. If what I prefer is to review this offer first before I get on the call, because I'm someone that really needs to digest for a day before I can have like cohesive thoughts, I want to be able to review that offer first without having only one option, which is to get on the phone and review it with you live. I just think this is a world where our preferences as candidates matter. And we can still pretend like we're in a world where now that the economy is, the power dynamics have shifted back to the employer, so to speak. Culture hasn't changed. We could just revert culture back to where it was 5 or 10 years ago, where people didn't expect this stuff. And that's just not the case. There are consequences to not giving a shit about the candidate experience. And you, as an organization, need to make a choice. Are you willing to incur those consequences or not?
Same thing with the employee experience. We've talked about here many times. Like, we don't have to do this anymore. I mean, that's gonna catch up with you, unless you truly don't care about it, to your point.
Yeah, you're opening. I mean, like, I think about talent stuff all the time, and like, you're completely like opening my eyes to another world that I haven't considered. The analog of the dasher is perfect. It's like, I don't actually want to interact with a human. And I could totally see that in the interview process. It's just like some of this interstitial stuff, like, just actually like tell me where I am to when the next time I'm going to talk to a human, and like fill in everything else for me. Like, makes intrinsic sense. Troy, where can people find you?
Yeah, I think the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. That's where I try to say as many stupid things as possible, as many times a week as possible. And my LinkedIn is just Troy Sultan. And if you're interested in guide or checking out what we do, we're kind of on the frontier of trying to build some neat tools in TA that haven't been built before. So we love feedback, and that guide's website is guide.co.
Sweet. Thanks for taking us to school today, man.
Thanks so much for the good questions. It was super fun.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment is Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.